Last year, I published this book together with colleagues, especially from Dignity Danish Institute Against Torture. And the book deals with the relationship between corruption and police violence. In many human rights circles, there's a tendency of seeing corruption and human rights violations as separate domains. When we were working with issues of police violence around the world, we realized that there was always mentioning of some kind of corruption, some kind of money involved. And we started thinking more concertedly about this to develop a more conceptual framework around this. So this led to us formulating the idea of a concept called violent exchange, which tries to combine the more economic aspects of police violence with the violence itself. This agenda is an agenda that is emerging in many different parts of the world. In human rights circles, there is an increasing focus on the relationship between corruption and torture. One example of this relationship between corruption and torture we can find, for instance, on the streets of Johannesburg, where we did some of the field work. And it's clear that a large part of the violence against migrants on the streets of Johannesburg has a very sort of like extortionate purpose. So if a migrant, a refugee, meets a police officer on the street, the police officer will often turn to the person and say, "Hey, make a plan. What do you think you can do now?" And the whole idea is that the migrant now has to come up with some money in order to get out of it. And there is a tendency that the further or closer one gets to the official system, the formal system of deportation, the more expensive it gets to get out. So what we can see here is that there is an intimate relationship between violence as potentiality, this violence that has not been carried out yet but is a threat, and the ability of the police to extort money from migrants. And violent exchange is not something that has only to do with migrants, it is also something to do with young men on the street, drug dealers, sex workers, all different other kinds of vulnerable populations around the world. So this has been our attempt to try to see what this actually means in practice. The fact that it is increasingly becoming part of a human rights discourse, and people are starting to see these kinds of connections and see maybe potentials in working with this relationship in a more concerted effort, has also led, for instance, to us influencing, contributing to a resolution on the relationship between corruption and human rights violations in the Human Rights Council that was just passed in 2018. That was, of course, a huge success for us. It allows us to work with normative frameworks within the human rights systems that are more in tune with the kinds of experiences and practices and of the NGOs, local NGOs, human rights organizations that we work with around the world. So in that sense, this creation of a new normative framework that is exactly more in tune with their experiences makes it possible for human rights organizations to perform a different kind of role that is not completely sort of like in tune with the conventions, be that the Convention Against Torture, the Convention Against Migration, or against corruption, the Convention Against Corruption. And I think that what this means is that we simply get a better possibility, a better way of working with police violence than we have before.